and welcome back to the Forbidden Knowledge podcast. As you can see, we're doing video for the first time, and we've set up a kind of a studio space in order to make this better for what's going on there. My name is Nathaniel Heutmaker, and I am the show's host. So, about a little more than a month and a half ago, I announced that I was going to be starting a new season, and the new season that I would be starting would be on Arthurian myth and tradition. And that is exactly what I intend to do. I had also originally stated that I was going to be doing it in the middle of October. Unfortunately, that did not come to fruition. I got sick. I still have some of the symptoms. I'm a little congested, a little bit with throat stuff still. You might be able to hear it in my voice even. I'm trying to make it so that way I'm keeping my promise of doing it in October. And so I'm recording here on Halloween for what's going on. At least here in America for what it is on October 31st. So, what to expect from this particular episode and from the podcast going forward and whatnot is that it will have video for it. It'll still have the exact same stuff when it comes to anything related to things that are happening on the audio. So it'll still be for Apple, it'll still be for Spotify, it'll still be for any of the other platforms that I have already up there for it. Nothing's going to be changing on that. Video is just now going to be added to it. On top of this, last season I was doing more of a kind of a lecture style thing with it where I went on a topic, I just kind of pre-recorded it, talked to you, gave information for what was going on. On this particular season, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going in and I'm going to be making it so that way I talk more with you and I take a journey with you, so to speak, instead of just telling you what I already know. I chose Arthurian myth and tradition specifically because I don't know anything about it. I haven't read the primary sources. I've hardly at all. I did a little bit over the last 6, 7 weeks here. I don't really know much in terms of secondary sources, in terms of other people's opinions on it and whatnot. I've done that on purpose because I want to make it so that way, for the most part, I'm having a fresh start going on with you on the journey to discover what there is to see, what there is that's there, making it so that way it's more of a process of discovery for what's going on. And so I will be pulling from as many different things that there are with it. I'm going to be reading during this time period. I'm going to be taking lots of notes. I'm going to be making it so that way I kind of showcase my ability to research. I'm going to be doing this as in semi real time in the beginning. Hopefully, a little later on, when I become more tech savvy, I will be doing some sort of streaming stuff with it too to make it so that way it's actually in real time for what's going on there as well. And right now, the basic game plan for all of this is just to pull from as many different sources as possible. So I have one of them here that I'll just show as an example. This is Parzival by Wolfram von Eschenbach, and there are plenty of other ones that I'm doing with it that are going to be done that way. We're going to be covering all of the various different notions of things with it. I'm going to be looking into all the different threads that come together to make it so that way we can learn more about these particular things that's going on with it. We're going to be looking at the Holy Grail and the various different possible meanings that it could be with it. You know, some people are going to use it from a Christian interpretation and it from the Last Supper. Others are going to make it so that way it's more of a heretical understanding of things with that in terms of, you know, the uh, maybe a potential bloodline that's going on there that's hidden inside of it. There's also just the spiritual illumination part of it that goes along with that, and many, many other theories that are out there. We're going to be looking into all of that as well. Currently, what I already see inside of it as potential things that are happening in terms of the threads that come together with it are some of the most obvious ones. First one is Christianity, of course, but it's not just Christians that we're looking at here. We're looking a lot into the Templar tradition specifically, mainly because of the fact that a lot of the older ones that were done were Templars themselves and whatnot. Now, when I say older, I mean the ones that were written a little later on in the era for what's going on, not the original stuff for the where the sources come from that have to do with the ancient Gaelic and Celtic peoples, specifically the Welsh, Irish, sometimes even the Scottish versions of things or what's going on. So in order to understand this, you're going to have to be looking into Celtic mythology, Gaelic mythology of various different things that are going on there. I personally have seen a little bit of connections even to Nordic mythology and whatnot, and of course, Celtic and Nordic are very similar in terms of stuff with it, which then we're going to have to look into some of the influences that were on them, such as the Scythians and the Proto-Indo-Europeans and things of this particular nature that were going on there. We also have stuff that I just found out now that might also play into that. There's a having to do with the Nart sagas and the Nart tales. There were groups of people there that may have made it so that way they influenced the stories of King Arthur and whatnot. We'll be looking at those elements as well. I haven't read any of these stories. I don't know anything about them at this stage, so I will have to be going and doing that. Um, we are going to be looking into, of course, influence from the Crusades and the politics of the time and how that shaped things and made things the way that they were. There's just so much to cover in all of this, and I'm going to be pulling from as many different source materials as I can possibly come across. I've seen stuff with alchemy that's in there and whatnot. I've seen some stuff with the tarot. I've seen certain ideas that have been put forth that have to do with other notions of things with it that are that particular way that are just from so many different esoteric teachings with it. Wolfram von Eschenbach is clearly an esoteric text. He even states that for himself. We're going to try to make it so that way we can even figure out who the authors are, what their specific leanings were, why they wrote the stories, if we can. Sometimes they're just anonymous, so we have nothing to pull from. Um, so we have all these different things that are going on here with that. I'm very excited to go on this journey and to deep dive it and try to figure out certain things that are that way with it. I know that I also see stuff from like Indonesia as a potential. I think that's a little maybe out there at this stage. I do know that Egypt is definitely a big part of this, and same thing with Sumeria, excuse me, and some of the stuff that's that region, the Middle Eastern region, for what's going on. Um, Islam played a big role in this for what's happening there. We also have the Alans that have a potential role in this as well. The Sarmatians, groups of this particular nature that we'll have to be looking into. And we're just going to try to put all the threads together, all the strands of it together, and see what comes out of it and making it so that way that's the case for that. I don't have any particular notion of where this is going to go or any particular um, findings that I've already have in mind to make it so that way it's going to be that particular way. I literally am going on a journey. I'm taking a grail quest, if you will, and I'm just going to see what is there, what's not there, what's important, what's not important. Um, and I'm going to do this for as long as I find it interesting. And I'm going to do it for as long as there's something that I view that I want to learn from it and continue on this journey and that kind of thing with it. And so I don't know how long this particular season is going to be because I know that this is a years long study that I will be going into and whatnot, meaning this will take multiple years for the level of depth and research that I want to go into. But every time I go and study mythologies or history or whatever, it ends up changing me as a person. It makes it so that way I learn something more about myself, I learn something more about the world around me, and I learn how to make it so that way I change my viewpoints on things, and by changing my thinking on things, also changing my behavior. And ultimately, I'm looking to see if there's any lessons that can be learned, anything that's of that particular persuasion and whatnot. Um, And so that's another part of this that's happening on that particular front as well here. And I'm trying to make it so that way it's, a good journey that everybody can have fun with and can do stuff with it. Um, so this is what the game plan is. I'm very excited in terms of making this happen for what's going on with that. I know that there's so many different things that can be looked at and angles. I'm not even certain necessarily where to begin. I'm going to be just beginning with my highest inspiration, I guess you can say. I'm going to be beginning with the source materials. Currently, the one that calls out the most to me, even if it's not like the first one or the last one or even these other ones that are going on with it, is Parzival by Wolfram von Eschenbach. Um, and we're going to be looking into that one first for what's happening. I can already tell you that there are certain things that are very clear to me on it, that it is extremely esoteric text for what's going on. I know a little bit about Kabbalah, which I see in there. I know a little bit about um, tarot, which is also in there. I know almost nothing in any way, shape, or form of alchemy, which I know that there are references to it for the little bit that I do know. And so I am going to make it so that way that is the aspect that I focus on as well, like making sure that I learn these other things that I'm seeing there, so that way I can understand the deeper meanings that are there as well for what's going on. And this is the basic game plan for it. I will go and do this season for as long as I feel that is appropriate, and then I will switch to another season later on that'll still be on Arthurian myth and tradition and lore and romance. And we might even pull from other things that aren't 100% um, of the Arthurian myth and tradition that have to do with other romances of the time period. I'm not entirely certain if I'll do that or not, just to kind of like give a basic comparison and see what's like specific to that era versus what's specific to these authors that are going on there with it. Um, Sorry, I'm just looking at some of the books that I have over here that we'll be touching upon and whatnot. So we'll be dealing with the Vulgate cycle, also known as the Lancelot cycle, and we'll be doing with the post-Vulgate cycle. Um, some of I'm not going to be able to show all of them here right now, but there's 10 books that are make up that particular one. That was the biggest one with it. It's like 3,500 pages to 4,000 pages long, something like that, if you count all 10 books. You have La Mort d'Arthur, which is the death of Arthur. That was done by Sir Thomas Malory. I have this particular version here that we're going to be looking at and dealing with as well. This is another substantially sized text for what's happening. Some of them are very short, though, and have various different small references to King Arthur or something like that. I mean, as you can see here, this one here is very thin, and yet there's stuff that needs to be dissected in it as well. Um, and it's a much older source, meaning it's having to pull from ancient Celtic stuff with it. I don't really like that term. We'll get into reasons why that is later on. So we're going to be looking into that. We're also going to be looking into the various different people that there are and trying to deep dive them. Merlin, Guinevere, King Arthur himself, whether they have any historical basis in reality, whether there's anything that's of that particular nature that's important for us to look at to try to understand that. So I'm not just going to be looking at the stories. I'm also going to be trying to place people in them, if possible, in their historical context. Now, the ultimate goal for all of this for me, just like with all of my research that I've been doing with it, is to make it so that way I learn the lessons of history and to make it so that way I ultimately change myself and to make it so that way I can glean more insight into the world around me and how it works and whatnot. And this is what the game plan is on that particular front as well. I know that there are some people who put that there's no King Arthur at all, that it was just completely legendary mythical figure. Some people claim that was amalgamation of multiple different people and characters. Some say it's a specific one that came out of 2nd century AD and whatnot, or BC if you prefer. CE if you prefer Common Era and that particular aspect of things. Um, we also have another one that might show up in it in the late 500s, early 600s for potential things that are going on there too. And so that's what will be happening there. Um, some of this stuff I won't be able to like read directly uh, to you because of translation and copyright stuff with it. So I will try to give my summation of the stories whenever I'm talking about uh, certain important parts that are happening there in order to make it so that way you can understand what's going on and follow along on this too if you so wish. Um, I'm also going to be making it so that way I just really go and really try to deep dive this. I already have lots of books on the topic, but I have plenty more that need to be bought to help me out with that. And so I have made it so that way I have two things that can be done in order to help with that if you wish to help support me on this particular journey. The first one is a buy me a coffee account and whatnot, which will be linked down in the description. The second one is I have an Amazon wish list in which you can go buy some of the books that I want to purchase directly in order to help me research this and study these materials. So that way you know exactly what's going on there. I'll be adding more books over time as I purchase them or other people purchase them and whatnot. Any and all money that I get will be going directly towards the research and or towards the website that I'm building to help be a database for all of this and whatnot. Uh, for those of you who are wondering what are my qualifications for all of this, that might make it so that way you'd be like, well, what gives you the right? First off, I'm a historian by trade. I have a bachelor's degree in history and whatnot. Focus was on Asia and the Islamic world specifically. Since that time period, I've continued to do a lot of research on different things or what's going on with that. If you want to get a taste for some of the things that I've done in terms of the research that's been going on with it, you can listen to any of my bonus episodes that have been going on for season one and also the one of them that I've done for season two that gives more of a historical component for these things and talking about some of that stuff. It'll become quite clear to everybody later on when listening to this and whatnot that I know what I'm or watching this and whatnot that this is the case for that. For those of you who want to watch this that are currently only doing the audio format, it'll be on YouTube and it'll be uh, Forbidden Knowledge initiates a journey for on YouTube channel for what's going on. You can also go and watch this that'll be embedded on my website at forbiddenknowledge.org for what's going on there. And so this is what I am the new project that I've taken on, and this is what I am very, very excited to dive into and whatnot, because it is something that I've wanted to do for quite some time that I knew I couldn't do, mainly because I lacked the amount of sufficient training and information in order to really, truly, deeply understand these traditions for what's going on here that are going to be showcased inside of it. And now I feel like I'm finally at a place and an area to make it so that way I can go and really truly deep dive it and fully understand it for myself and for other people um, on that particular front as well. But through other research that I've done beforehand now that will help make it so that way I understand how to do this. In season one, I went over something called the Trivium Method, which has to do with a way of thinking, a process of how to think rather than what to think. I'm going to be trying to showcase how that works here and how I do research and making it so that way that's the case for that. Why I'm bringing this up also is to make it so that way if there's something that happens to where I say something that contradicts me from previous episodes when I'm doing this, it'll be done in such a way that it's important to note that what's happening here is either one of two things. One is that I'm just talking about something else completely, and I'm just giving another particular variation of what could be going on, or looking into a different angle of it. If it's like the Holy Grail, or potentially who King Arthur is, or whatever the deal is, that's that. That's thing number one. Number two, which is just as likely to occur, and I will try to make it very clear when I do state that this is the case for what's going on, that in those instances where I have changed my mind on something due to new evidence, new information that's coming in, I will explain why I no longer view it the old way and why I view it this way, and the process of how that changed from one part to another. And so, with this, I think that that's all that is going to be done for the first episode. In the second episode, we'll start reading Wolfram von Eschenbach. I will start taking notes, and I will make it so that way I share my findings on that for what's going on, and making it so that way we all kind of learn about this together. Some of you may already know a lot about the Arthurian myth and tradition. Some of you might know nothing for what's going on this particular front. Welcome, one and all, to this particular thing with it. I am just going to try to revitalize this tradition and bring it back to the forefront. I think that it has a lot of powerful information that can be put forth to help out this world and to help other people understand the various different stories for what's going on there. And stories do have the power to change the world, whether you believe it or not. That's what all of our beliefs are based upon, stories that we tell ourselves and whatnot. This could be our political beliefs, it could be our religious beliefs, it could be anything and everything that's going on there for that. Stories are what make up our world and how we understand our world. And the certain stories have lasted for a very long time and still have a very much an impact on our world and civilization to this day. Some of them don't matter in any way, shape, or form. Sometimes whole nations rise and fall based upon a particular narrative that they believe in, a type of story for what's going on. We also use the narrative for the term that's used for, you know, when we're watching TV or reading newspapers or articles online or whatever the deal is. It's all part of the same thing, and showcasing how to navigate this particular thing and whatnot, the process of how research is done makes that happen. Now, one of the things I will be saying on this particular front is that I will be pulling from a plethora of sources. I will not just be pulling from scholarly sources and whatnot. Scholarly sources are very important, and I will be pulling from that. But that does not mean that they have all the answers for what's going on. I will be pulling from alternative historians and alternative um, people that are fact check researchers, let's say, as well, and then of course my own particular things and findings on this, because that's the only way you can get the full picture. To pull only from one source is to make it so that way you blind yourself to what the possibilities are in terms of whatever you're researching, and you cannot have a truth discovery mechanism that's done properly. You've already censored yourself from the beginning by doing that, and it is a very poor form of doing research. That doesn't mean that what the scholars are doing are wrong. They could be very well be right. but to ignore the fact that other people who are everyday people might see something that the scholars do not would be foolish on that particular front. Some of these people that are up there are in the ivory towers and whatnot. They are so far removed from things that unless it definitively says that this is something with it, then they don't believe it. An example of this that I can pull from would be from the Nordic research and that kind of thing, where Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, the necklace that's worn and whatnot by certain heathens and pagan groups, or even people who just like it and that kind of thing with it, and people who wore it during the Viking Age. If it weren't for one of the necklaces saying there of Mjolnir, literally stating this is a hammer, there would be certain historians that would not believe that it was that way, which to me is utterly ridiculous that it needs to be to that level that it has to explicitly state that it is that, even when you can just tell by looking at it that it fits the description of what Mjolnir is inside of the text and whatnot. Okay, so sometimes that's the case for it. Another one is that, there's sometimes I had someone I was speaking to directly about this who is a researcher, and it just shows how they have no capacity for lateral thinking and no capacity to understand even real world stuff, and they just get so stuck in their particular paradigm of research for what's going on there that they just can't see the reality of stuff for it. So there's the association had to do with this god named Uller, which is also a Norse one, and I'm focusing on the Norse because that's what I was just researching myself before I did all this other stuff that was going on, and it's the one that's freshest in my mind. But I'm shifting gears into the Arthurian myth and tradition, as I stated before. Um, and one of the things that happens with Uller is that his name could potentially be associated with wool, meaning literally the woolly one. And he's a god that shows up in the Norse pantheon in wintertime and whatnot. And for whatever reason, the professor was having a hard time understanding that wool is directly associated with winter. That we wear wool, and even in our modern era, some of us, during winter time, that we don't wear it during summer time. So it was helpful to showcase that he was, in fact, at least in part, associated with winter in some capacity or another. And there's plenty of other things that help with that notion. But the point I'm trying to bring up is that he couldn't make that connection with wool and winter. Now, I'm not saying that he is a winter god. I don't know I'm not going to get into all that here. I have my own interpretation of things based upon that. But the fact that the professor could not make that intuitive leap directly inside of it, then it's not going to work. A lot of these myths and traditions, they do not make it so that way everything is literal and whatnot. The ancient peoples of the world thought more symbolically than we do now. Too many of us are trapped in a left brain prison idea that makes it so that way everything has to be literal, everything has to be categorized, everything has to fit into a particular box. That's not how the ancients thought. I want to make this very clear on this particular point. And because of that, it makes it so that way no matter what, we have to take that into account for things with it. I mean, you can see behind me over here with Anubis and whatnot, and he has, the heart and the feather there for what's going on and the weighing of the scales and whatnot. Now, obviously, if you were to weigh a heart versus a feather, the heart's going to weigh more in a physical sense. But since it's symbolic and it's not literal, it's a feather of Ma'at and truth, and so it's about your consciousness and whether you've made it so that way you do this, and it's done in front of 42 judges, and it's called the 42 Negative Confessions of Egypt. I'm not going to go into that, but the point is to show that this is symbolic behind me over here for what's going on. That right there is a perfect example of how things have symbolic meaning to the myths, to the stories, to the legends, rather than being always literal. There are parts that, of course, are all literal as well. So this is the game plan, and this is what's going to be happening with it. I thank you all for listening and watching. It's been a lot of work to try to get this studio set up the way I want to and whatnot. Hopefully, you guys like it. Eventually, there'll be expansions and things with it. There'll be different camera angles, but for now, this is what it is. It's going to be more of a vlogging type style thing that's going to be done here with it, and I look forward to seeing any and all of you that are interested in this in the next episode. Thank you so much for stopping by.